Okay, awesome. Thank you for your patience. Okay, we're gonna jump in and get started here. So I am Vanessa Costanzo. I am based in Madison, Wisconsin, about 2.5 hours north of Chicago for anyone that is not familiar with where Wisconsin is. It is a beautiful place to visit, especially in the summertime. So if you ever want to come hang out, we have lots of lakes and great restaurants, great food. So hit me up and I would love to show you to my favorite places. So I've actually grown up around the Claris and FileMaker communities since I was quite young. My parents founded our company in 1994. And so I've really grown up both personally and professionally around this group of people and have been involved in a lot of different ways throughout my career. So I did tech support as a probably middle schooler through high school, college. That was kind of always my summer job. And then eventually went into more business development. And then now I'm in my role as VP of Operations. So when I came back to Naviq in 2016, I really focused on our process. So I was really interested in how we could be more efficient and effective in our interactions with our clients and with our team internally. And so we designed our Naviq P2S platform, so problem to solution. And that has been really helpful. But the other thing that happened when I came back in 2017 is that we joined the Wisconsin Family Business Center. So I work on a daily basis with my dad. My mom is one of the owners of our company. And there are a lot of things that are unique to family business that you don't quite see other places. And so it's been a great resource for us to have that support as we grow our business and as we plan for the future. I've been on their advisory board since 2018, and it's really where my passion and excitement for both of these topics has really been fueled. Out of raise of hands, any of you working in a family business or with family? Awesome, very cool. That's great, I'm excited. So I have an MBA with concentrations in marketing and entrepreneurship, and I did a Master's of Science in Information Systems. I chose a program that really focused on the crossover between the two and how technology impacts business, business impacts technology, and how it's really important to have everyone on the same page and speaking the same language. So I've been able to bring a lot of that back into my role at Naviq. Kind of on a personal note, I love planning things, so I plan lots of reunions, family vacations, dinner parties, and I love processes and lists. So you will actually see this. I have a worksheet, and what started as a checklist and now has kind of like morphed into a workbook that you will all be able to access after this session. So here's our new thing. So I had so much content on multi-generational workforce and business continuity and succession planning. As I was going through trying to put it all into one presentation, I realized I could do a presentation on each of these things individually. So today you all kind of get a choice. I have decks for just focusing on succession, just focusing on multi-gen, and then kind of a high-level overview of both. I will preface this with, I'm doing full-length webinars on each of these topics in April. So if you are interested, if someone from your team is interested, I would love for you to join me. There will be information at the end of this where you can sign up for that as well. But I'm going to give you a minute here to vote on Menti, and we are going to check out our results. If my screen toggling works here. Give you another minute.
Vanessa, how do you vote?
What? If you aim your camera at the QR code, it'll give you an option to put them in order.
My phone hates Alexander.
I can do it on my iPad. I can vote for you, Stephen.
Multigen.
Okay. Okay. Ooh. Okay, so it looks like just barely we have our high-level overview of both. So let me toggle back here to our slides. And we'll jump right in. Okay, so kind of high-level overview of both. We'll talk about the intersection of these two things too, because they really do go hand in hand. So where are we going today? We'll talk a little bit about the multi-generational workforce. So what do we mean when we say that? Why is it becoming a buzzword, and why is it so important? And then we'll talk a little bit about continuity and succession. So what is the difference between legacy and succession? Why is this important? And who needs to worry about this? And then we'll get in a little bit to practical applications. So like I mentioned, I have a worksheet, and there will be some content that you'll be able to access after the session as well. And then we'll talk really quickly about some key takeaways and next steps. So whether that's finding commonalities or taking steps within your organization to start this culture of innovation and strategizing for your future. If you would like to access the slides, personally I had a hard time getting them in the Engage to Go app, so you can use that QR code to get a PDF of the slides to follow along as we go right now. I'll give a few of you a minute to do that. Okay, so let's dive in. So what is the multi-generational workforce? So at its very basic level, it is people from many generations working in the same organization. This is really becoming a buzzword and kind of an important topic because we're seeing people have a lot longer lifespans. It's increasing the number of people that are either choosing to work later in life or due to necessity have to work later in life. And they're either enjoying that purpose that it's giving them, and so they want to find a way to stay involved, or they need to, for financial reasons, stay in the workforce. So right now, for the first time in modern history, we have 5 active generations in the workforce. There was a 2020 World Economic Forum, ARP, OECD study that found investing in multi-generational workforces will raise GDP per capita by 19% by 2050. So not only is this important for us to figure out how to work together and be in the workplace together, but it is also really important for economic stability and growth as well. One thing to note is that people do define the generations a little differently. There's no set concrete definition of this year to this year is Generation X or baby boomers. Especially in kind of generations X, Y, and Z, you see kind of a 1 to 3 year difference in what they have as the start and end dates. But for the purpose of today, this is what I'm going with. It's from Pew Research and the Library of Congress, kind of what they use as their definitions. The one that's really interesting, and there's a little asterisk there on the end, is Generation Z. So Generation Z had been, even 5 years ago, had been thought of as anyone born between 1997 and 2020. 2020 hits, and we have COVID. And now they've redefined Generation Z to end anywhere between 2010 and 2012, because one of the main characteristics of this next upcoming generation, or Gen Alpha, is that their formative years were during COVID. And so these definitions and these ranges can change, and it's really interesting to see what the defining characteristics are of different generations that kind of bind them together in that shared experience. Another thing that's been interesting to see is in the last few years, there's really been a shift to challenge the use of generations in research. So they're trying to look at different variables now beyond age cohort to really evaluate data and responses. A big organization that has done this has been the Pew Research Center. They actually have an article I have in my resources page at the end that takes a really interesting dive into why they're trying to do this and why they're trying to have a more holistic view of people. So let's dive in. This is great. We have an awesome landscape. We've kind of set the scene, but many researchers and journalists have noticed that there are a lot of challenges with the multi-generational workforce. But you will also see, I don't think I've seen a single article that would argue that the benefits are not outweighed by any of the challenges. There are a lot of discussions about how employers haven't really embraced these benefits organizationally. A lot of people say it's important, but they aren't ready to embrace or leverage those benefits. There was a study by Deloitte in 2020 that said 70% of organizations felt that leading a multi-generational workforce was an important or very important part of their success in the upcoming 12 to 18 months. Out of that 70%, only 10% felt that they were actually ready to address it. So that is why I think we have this huge gap, and I'm really excited that you're all here to kind of learn what we can do to embrace this and to move forward. So what are the challenges? The first challenge I want to talk about is stereotypes and motivators. So I've taken some common stereotypes from all of the generations. They're up here on the screen, kind of scrambled around. And when you look at this, do you associate some of these words with generations that are listed here, just in your head when you first see it? Does anyone want to share one of the ones that they would link to a generation?
I'll go with the easy one, Gen Z for digital natives.
Okay, Gen Z, digital natives.
Traditional silent generation.
Traditional silent generation.
I'll go with one I disagree with, entitled millennials.
Entitled millennials. As a millennial, yes. Awesome. So what's really interesting when we look at this is not everything on this list is negative. Usually we think of stereotypes, we think of negative things. But there are some really, really important attributes and characteristics on this list. And we could take a lot of time to dig into where those stereotypes have come from, and there's some great TEDx talks and things that actually do that I would highly recommend. But the important part is that we acknowledge that there are stereotypes that each of us have and that impact the way that we work, not only with our other coworkers, but with our clients as well. So this graphic is from a company called McCrindle Research. They're based in Australia. And it also includes Gen Alpha, who we mentioned earlier, as they're kind of just starting to enter the workforce, kind of those first summer job, after school job kind of workers. And so it's important to kind of have them on the horizon and on our view too. The top part of this graphic is really fun. I'm sure we've all seen kind of the iconic cars and music devices and slang and those sort of things. But what I really wanted to focus on and what really struck me about this is the bottom half of this infographic. So they're looking at leadership style, ideal leaders, learning style, influence, and marketing, and seeing where the differences in communication and the differences in kind of how we work with each other come about from a generational standpoint. This is really going to speak to some of the topics we're going to continue to dive into in the next few slides. So please kind of keep this in the back of your head as we're going forward. So the next challenge I want to talk about is communication. So in March of 2024, there was research done by LinkedIn and Fortune magazine. They found that 1 in 5 Gen Z workers reported they have not had a single direct conversation with someone over 50 years old in their workplace in the previous year. They also said that around 40% of the people aged 55 and over had not spoken to a Gen Z colleague in the last year. That really struck me when I was going through and reading the study. And I think it's really important, and it comes back to this challenge of communication. Not only do people have, it really highlights like the severity and the prevalence of this challenge. So communication is critical. It impacts and influences everything else that we're going to talk about today. And it's really important to have strong communication in order to leverage those opportunities that we're going to see. There's 3 main areas of communication that we can focus on: mode, method, and verbiage and wording. And each of these elements plays a very distinct role in ensuring that we have effective communication. It's really important to remember, though, with communication, this isn't just generational, but each individual is going to have their own communication style and preferences. And it's really important to dig in and understand with the people that you're working with what their preferences and what their communication style are. This in particular is impacted on the previous slide by the influence advice, learning styles, and leadership styles from that graphic that we just saw. So what are these three things? So mode is going to be kind of our broad category. So that's our medium or channel where the communication is occurring. So how our message is being transmitted. It's going to be something like verbal discussion or written review, info, charts and graphics, visuals, those sorts of things. Our method, and let's think about something like feedback. So as we're talking about feedback within our organizations, if we use that example, our mode is going to be, how is someone expecting to receive feedback? Are they expecting you to have a verbal discussion with them? Are they expecting a written review? Or are they expecting some sort of graph with where they fit in relation to their peers or coworkers? Mode is also going to impact our immediacy of feedback. Then the next one is our method. So that's the specific technique or tool that we're using within the different modes of communication. So it's really kind of our practical means of delivering our message. So if we have some of the marketing styles from before, we see that either traditional print or digital targeted, digital social, real time. In feedback examples, we're looking at, are they looking for a memo, an email, a Slack for written? Are they for verbal? Are they expecting an in-person review, a virtual review, or maybe just a phone call? Are they expecting something real time or after the fact? And then verbiage and wording. So this is the specific language, vocabulary, and phrasing that people are going to be using in their communication. It's the choice of words, tone, and structure that are really developing your content and style. For our feedback example, the language they're using or what they'd expect to hear in business. So are they receiving feedback from their peers, which could have a much different level of formality than feedback from a manager? Or are they expecting to be involved in the feedback and kind of have that 360 review of self-reflection and peer and manager reflection as well? So kind of with all of that we talked about with communication, the important thing is really to try and minimize these differences because they can impact your collaboration, productivity, and workplace environment. But with that being said, with all of these things, how do we take the communication preferences of all of our people and mesh that down into something that really blends with our company and our company brand, our company style? So here's where having kind of communication guidelines can be really, really important and really effective. What methods can people expect to use in different scenarios? When is it okay to send an email versus have that conversation or send a Slack message or a text message? When does something need to be more formal, like being written down in a memo or something that has a hard copy? It allows us to make sure it's consistent and allows us to make sure that everyone's on the same page, and maybe we'll understand why, well, I thought that email could have been, or I thought that meeting could have been an email sort of thing. If there's guidelines for that, it kind of helps make those decisions and make sure that people are on the same page and are kind of seeing things from the same lens. Another really important piece of this is multimodal communication. So hybrid approaches that are combining verbal and written and visual so that you're not just coming at everyone with one type of communication. That's going to not only help bridge the gap between different generations, but different people's learning styles and communication styles. And at the end of the day, the important thing to remember is that people are looking for open, concise, and clear information and communication, regardless of the generation that they are in. They may have differences in how they process and respond to that information, but at the end of the day, they're looking for that clarity and conciseness. So how can we make sure from an organization level that we're providing that? The next challenge we want to talk about is unconscious bias. So our unconscious biases can stem from the stereotypes that we discussed earlier, and they can also really impact how we perceive and interact with our coworkers. So it'll impact how you collaborate, how you communicate, and ultimately it can impact your company culture, either positively if it's acknowledged and addressed, or really negatively if it's not. As we discussed with communication, one group could dismiss another's communication completely as ineffective or unprofessional and totally miss the content or intent because of their unconscious bias or these stereotypes that they have with certain people and how that impacts their communication. Unconscious biases are going to amplify misunderstandings and just cause a lot of issues in our workplace. One of the areas that we really see this is in leadership and decision making. So managers may unconsciously favor employees that align with their generational values or work style. Leadership roles, important project assignments may be assigned based on generational stereotypes rather than actual merit and skill. Two examples of that would be older employees who might be seen as less ambitious or near retirement, so they're not being put on long-term or innovative projects where they could really lend a lot of information and insight into that team. Or on the other hand, younger colleagues where their suggestions and inputs are dismissed because they don't have experience, but maybe they're thinking in a new and different way that could really help push things forward. And then our last challenge is kind of on expectations. So there's two kind of sides of differing or challenges with expectations, different expectations from the employer and different expectations from each other. We won't get too deep into this right now, but if you join me in April, I will dive into this one in a lot more detail. But the differing expectations of the employer are in three main areas: benefits, compensation, and work environment. A lot of this is just due to the fact that people are in different stages of life, so they're looking for and need different things when they're coming to you as an employee. And then they have different priorities and needs. So some of the younger generations are known to be more focused on mental health and well-being. So having a work environment or benefits that kind of address that and take that into consideration are going to be more important for them versus somebody that may be in a different point in their life where preventative health screenings and access is going to be more important for them. And then on work environment. So one of the things that we've seen, especially in the last few years, is just the accessibility of remote work and work-life balance, which is something that we need to make sure we're communicating and being able to assess how our employees are feeling about that to make sure we're delivering to them what they need. Another area where we see differing expectations is in recognition. So not all compensation and value from a workplace is from your actual benefits and salary, but also from how you're recognized. And different generations have different expectations as far as how they will be recognized and who will be recognizing them. So it is really important to kind of take that into consideration as well. And then kind of with each other. So how, who, and where are we communicating, and when and how much are we working with each other? Those are kind of the three areas where we're really seeing those differing expectations within a coworker group. So there was a lot of barriers and challenges, but like I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of benefits that are going to outweigh all of those. Many employers have not leveraged those, and so we're going to distill these down into 4 categories: collaboration, mentorship, talent pipeline, and diversity. So collaboration. By embracing that multi-generational workforce, we're going to be bringing together people with different perspectives that have that opportunity to foster collaboration. By encouraging teamwork and designing and creating intentional teams, we're able to take a cross-functional approach, not only between maybe UX developers and PMs, but across different departments and across different generations, so that we're bringing not only this environment of inclusion, but also bringing these different viewpoints and different experiences to the table so that we're coming up with the best solution. Collaboration is going to really uniquely position us to combine those fresh ideas and innovation with that wisdom and experience, coming together in one place, leading to more innovative and more forward-thinking solutions. The next one that's huge, and I can't stress this enough, and we will actually talk about this as we transition into business continuity, is mentorship. I'm really a fan of reverse mentorship. So it's kind of this concept that you're pairing people across generations and that one person is not the mentor and the other is the mentee, but it's more of a collaborative mentorship relationship. So you are each mentoring each other on different skill sets and different things. Maybe one person is the mentor on a new social media platform, but when you're talking about navigating professional development or growth, they might be the mentee, and those roles are flipping. There are also a lot of benefits to these cross-generational mentorship relationships outside of just the work walls. It's a great place to develop these relationships with someone that can give you life advice and navigating different milestones. The other opportunities that I want to talk about are talent pipeline and diversity. So another major benefit that is particularly important for many companies, especially growing companies, is embracing the multi-generational workforce to expand your talent pipeline. It not only just gives you a larger pipeline number-wise, but a stronger and more well-rounded one as well. It's going to open the door to different skill sets and different opportunities. In 2024, the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics showed that 25% of the workforce was 55 years or older, and that was only 11% in 2000. And so the impact of this is that we have this generation of people with this great experience and skills that are still looking to remain in the workforce and looking for a meaningful way to do that. And so we want to be able to take advantage of that and leverage their talents. On the flip side, it also means that there are 10,000 baby boomers that are retiring every single day. And so we need a way to be able to fill those gaps within our workforce. So by having these multiple generations come together, it's providing us many more opportunities as we're looking to hire and as we're looking to fill roles. Not only kind of within family business, which we'll talk about a little bit more, but this also is really important with business continuity and planning as we're planning for those next managers, next leaders, the next people that are coming in. And then lastly, diversity. So the greater diversity you have generationally, it's going to be greater diversity in skill sets, outlook, experience. Like we talked about earlier, each generation has kind of their shared experience that they're coming in with, and the more generations we have, the more experience we're going to have in our well-rounded teams. So kind of summarizing where we've come so far, there are so many opportunities and benefits that are going to outweigh the challenges by looking at the multi-generational workforce and really embracing this. We'll talk about how to do that in a few minutes. And because so many employers have not embraced this, making it a focus and a priority can really make you stand out when it comes to recruiting and retention. And lastly, it's really important to remember generation is just one layer of our identity, and that having that diversity is going to help us build better teams. So now we're going to kind of move over into legacy and succession. So as you're looking at this screen, how would you define legacy and succession? What are the biggest differences between the two in your mind? I'll give you a minute to think about it.
Legacy is what you leave behind. Succession planning is what's in front of you.
Okay, legacy is what you leave behind. Succession planning is what's in front of you. Anyone else?
Like old infrastructure?
Old infrastructure?
Incoming.
Yep, incoming new infrastructure. Awesome.
Yeah, legacy could be teams or processes, but it could be also a culture dynamic, be a lot of different things. Succession planning is generally focused on individuals and passing the torch.
And we also had legacy is teams, products. Succession is passing the torch. I'm distilling that down because we don't have a mic back there, but awesome. So exactly. So legacy is something we're creating on a daily basis. The word legacy originates from a Latin word that means person delegated, which I think is really interesting because, as you said, after we are done building or creating our legacy, we need to have someone to pass that along to and to move that forward. And so that's kind of where succession planning comes in as that vehicle to ensure our legacy endures. Succession planning is really the strategy that goes into the transition, change, and leadership. And so why does this matter? I would say especially in kind of the tech space that we're in where things are moving so fast and changing daily, it requires leaders and teams to really be future ready and to really keep that in mind. And so having that succession plan is critical to ensure business continuity. And you don't have to take my word for it. The QTI Group, which is a staffing, recruiting, and compensation consulting firm in Madison, conducts an HR trends survey every year and presents their findings in a webinar, which is in my resources page. And in 2025, 69% of respondents said building a sustainable workforce was a moderate or significant challenge for them. And building a sustainable workforce through succession planning was the #3 challenge for businesses in 2025. That is up 6 spots from 2024 when it was 9th. So a lot of people are thinking about this. This is gaining a lot of momentum and becoming something really important to think about and to focus on. As we talked about a little bit earlier, there are so many people that are at retirement age, and 4.1 million Americans are going to come of retirement age last year in the next 3 years. And so we have a lot of people that are transitioning out of the workforce, and we'll need to have plans in place so that the people that are stepping into those roles can feel prepared. I mentioned earlier, kind of the idea of succession is hard to think about for a lot of people. And so it's really important to remember that the goal is to keep our businesses thriving and continuing regardless of who it is that's in that driver's seat or steering the ship. And so what can we do to have a plan in place to make sure that that can happen? So who needs to worry about succession? What size businesses, what types of companies? Spoiler alert, everyone. So it's not just something that's for family business. It's not just something that large corporations need to worry about. It's important to think about succession planning as kind of that generational transfer, or not only about generational transfer or transition, but really leadership continuity. So how are we developing our employees for future growth, future opportunity, future leadership? So whether that's a junior dev becoming a team lead or a senior developer, or client services that's going to become a manager, or a social media manager who will someday become your CMO, how are you setting people up for that path to transition into leadership or more significant roles? It's also, as we talked about, a way to build your pipeline. So talent pipeline is really important. It's really important to have the right people on the bus, and this is a way that you can kind of build that group within your organization. A quick story. So in March of 2020, we had been members of the Family Business Center for 3 years. I still had only ever really thought of succession planning as like this long-term exercise that was off in the future. And went to a presentation where 2 business owners, along with their legal advisor and CPA, talked about very unexpected circumstances that had thrust them into leadership and ownership of their companies. They talked about how that experience shaped them and how they plan for the future, and what they wish they would have known, which was a lot, and what they wish would have been done differently within their families in order to have that be a more successful transition for them. They talked about how they wanted it to be very different for their families if that were to ever happen to them. So I had never really thought of succession planning from that standpoint, but I think one of the things we're going to focus on today is why that is so important. Little did we know, just days later, the world, like literally 3 days later, the world shut down, and this became front and center for a lot of different organizations, and I think that's why we're starting to see a lot more discussion around this topic. So our 2 types of succession planning that we're going to talk about is a really important distinction. So we have our emergency planning, which is for something unexpected, that situation I just talked about, where all of a sudden the person that was leading or the person in that role is no longer able to. We want to make sure that there is a plan in place. So the focus in this instance is really that leadership continuity. And then we have our long term, which is really what people think of for the most part when they hear succession planning. They think of someone getting to retirement age or changing a role and leaving an organization. So this is really here where the focus is developing those future leaders and developing that talent pipeline within our company. So we'll dive in a little bit into each of the different types and talk through those. So between emergency planning and long-term planning, you're going to have a lot of the same principles, steps, and considerations. Each is really important for very different reasons. So when you're in the situation where you have that sudden or unexpected transition, it's important that you're minimizing disruption to your employees, to your customers, and kind of maintaining that stability for moving forward. Your concern and your thoughts are mostly focused on the impact to community, employees, internal and external stakeholders. So if it was a business owner, there could also be implications for financial security for not only the business, but their family as well. And so it's really important to have these plans in place and have these discussions so that there aren't any surprises. So from a high level, the important pieces in this process are to identify those interim leaders in your business and then to communicate that to them so that they know. It does not do anyone any good if those conversations are had and those decisions are made and nobody else knows about it. So again, where our communication comes into place. And then documenting critical processes and decisions. So ideally, there are backups or other people that have been trained to do things, but at minimum, have a plan in place so they can figure it out with documentation on the fly if something were to happen. Another important piece of the documentation is having a system or tool to store and share the wide variety of account information, passwords, important documents, key contacts, so that people know where to go and how to access the information that they need to if anything were to happen. If you're thinking, I think we had 1.5 solo shops in here, but if you're thinking, I'm a solo shop, this doesn't apply to me, I would counter that it's actually more critical to document these things in that instance. There isn't a de facto next person up, or the next person is going to take this on. So it's really important to have that kind of business will and succession plan. So you know who will take control, how should they proceed, if there's anything legally or financially they need to take care of. And it's another way that you're creating and preserving your legacy. And then kind of when we talk about long-term planning, so this is really our strategic planning and growth. So it's ensuring that we're growing sustainably in alignment with our long-term vision and strategic goals for the entire company. As I said before, this isn't just about CEOs and owners, but developing leadership across your entire organization. And that's a really important mindset shift to have, that it's not just for the one person that's sitting at the top of the org chart, but it's for anyone that's in that leadership role and position. Once you have your kind of strategic goals in place and strategic plan in place, it's really important to review those regularly. So you'll identify your key roles and responsibilities within your organization, and it will allow you to really assess and evaluate your current employees and their skill sets. Who would be good candidates for key roles? Do we need to look outside of our organization and start that process? What does that look like so that we can build the right pipeline and plan for leadership readiness? There are many similarities kind of for the solopreneurs as we're looking at the long-term planning that we had in the emergency plan. They have kind of 3 main options of when they hit retirement. They can sell the company, they can transfer the company, or they can close it completely. And the biggest difference between the emergency planning and long-term planning in that instance is your involvement and the timing as far as when that process occurs. So let's try and apply this a little bit. That was a lot. Where do we begin? It's very overwhelming. I feel like that every time I go to a Family Business Center event. So I've tried to put together kind of a 6-step framework for how we can go through this and do this ourselves, with the conversations we should have, who should be on your team and why, who should initiate the process, considerations we should make, resources to leverage, and then plan review. So we'll jump in and get into step 1. So our first step, conversations to have. The most important part that kind of everything stems for is, what is our strategic plan? And this should really range from that 1 year all the way out to 10 years in those anywhere from 2 to 3 year intervals. To to really have that full picture of where you're going and what the plan is. So this will help you see what roles are critical and key at not just the 1 year or the 10-year interval, but the intervals in between, because that's going to allow you to build that team and grow that team with you as your goals for your company change and evolve. There may be jobs that don't even exist in your organization today, but you know that 3 years from now, where you're headed and where you want to go, you'll need to bring someone in. So is there someone within your organization that exists that has maybe some of the skills or experience that you would need to be able to grow them into that role, or do you need to look elsewhere? And then what other things are needed to have people be ready? Do they need formal training or schooling? Do they need mentorship? Is it more focusing on knowledge transfer and how you can make sure that these things that someone is doing on a daily basis, that they are able to communicate that and pass that on to the person that will be taking that over? And then kind of where are gaps? So one thing I would like to say, and I think it's really important to think about, is what happens if there is no plan? I think it's a really important thing to think about, because you can say, okay, this is great, but it'll work out, it'll be fine. But to really sit down and think, okay, what happens if there is no plan? At a high level and at a detailed operational level. Something as simple as, what if you manage your client servers and for some reason you're no longer able to do so? Will they be locked out? Will they have to start fresh? Will they need to find another contractor to try and help them? What are the steps going to be for them? And I think many of us are in a position where we enjoy what we do. We enjoy our relationships with our clients and with our partners, and putting it and framing it in that light will really help us see, okay, where should I start? What's most critical? Where do I really need to focus my time? For solopreneurs, are there people in your network that you can lean on or partner with? Starting those conversations before you put something formal in place, so that if there were ever an emergency, there would be a plan and your clients would be able to move forward. That's also something that if you are a smaller shop, I know we've had clients that have come and said, okay, well, like, what is the plan? Like, you win the lottery and you leave. Like, what happens to us? And so being able to communicate that plan and to have something that you can come back and say can really give them a lot of peace of mind. So next, building our team. So our teams are kind of built out of two different areas. We have our internal stakeholders and our external key advisors. So as far as the internal people that need to be on your team as you're starting this process, it's typically going to be anyone in an ownership role, our key people in leadership, so team leads, management, and any potential successors. I think that third one kind of gets left to the end, but is really key and really important that they're on the same page. Because one of the really important pieces of this team is this is the owner's opportunity to communicate their goals and their desired results. So everyone around them can be creating and working towards that. This really provides our clear expectations, allows everyone to create and execute development plans and a transition plan that's all on the same timeline. And it's really the way that as an owner, you can make sure that your legacy is enduring. So that legacy that you've spent all of this time creating and working towards, if you have this plan and you have this communication, you can make sure that everyone's on the same page to move that forward. As far as our external key advisors, if you do not have a formal advisory board, you can start building something really informal and lining up these advisors that you can talk to and that can be accessible to your team. I would say starting with our mentors and then getting into some of the professional services. So depending on your situation as an owner, you may have these people kind of personally and professionally. And one thing that is really critical is that they are all on the same page so that your documents and plans do not contradict each other. So these would be people like your banker, your lawyer, your CPA, estate planner, insurance agents, financial advisors, those sorts of people. These are your experts. You can lean on them. You can trust them. They hopefully have guided people through this before, so something that you might think is crazy and unexpected is something that they've seen and worked through with someone in the past. As a side note, if you are looking to add these professional services and advisors kind of to your tool belt, it's really important to ask them if they have worked with privately held and closely held businesses before, and if you have a type of transition that you're looking to create, to make sure that that's something that they've guided people through. If possible, getting these people together and facilitating conversations is really going to help avoid any surprises or contradictions. But if not, making sure that we're having those conversations, sharing those documents across the group. So typically, these two groups combined, our internal and our external, are going to form our transition team. So that's going to be for any type of transition, unexpected, long-term, and also kind of an emergency response team for those unexpected transitions. Because typically, when that is unexpected, there are going to be a lot of things that are going to happen really fast. So if everyone knows what the plan is and knows what their role is, it just makes that a lot easier. So next, that's great, we have all this information, but who should be initiating all of this? Here's one area where there's a lot of differences between family business and non-family business. It's actually tends to be flipped depending on which category you fall into. I won't get too deep into the why, but if you are a family business and you would like to talk about this, come see me afterwards. Or I have a link for my Calendly that you can book 30 minutes and we can chat. But for family business, this is typically initiated by the next gen, so the incoming generation. It's why peer groups, family business centers, advisors familiar with family business are so beneficial and so crucial. For non-family business, this is typically led by current leadership and ownership if they're different people. So the most important part in both of these scenarios is that there are open discussions between current leadership and those potential successors. Our leaders are really the ones that are setting the tone, and it's important that their vision is clear so that everyone can buy in and be on the same page. So next, what's important to think about? So for everyone, it's really important to think about our talent pipeline. So what is our strategic plan, and how are we developing our people internally, and where do we need to look externally? Building and encouraging that culture of mentorship. So how are we building a strong company culture in the present, but how are we preparing the next generation of leaders so that our company remains strong moving forward? It's another way to ensure that our institutional knowledge is passed down. And then what is our runway? So what is our expected timeline that we need to prepare for these transitions? For current gen, what are the things that you need to hand off? Are there things that you and only you do? Can this be a gradual process? Will you be able to train your replacement and be a resource for them before you actually leave? Or is it something where the switch is going to flip and it is no longer your responsibility? And another thing to think about, many companies have grown and you've just kind of grown with the role. Will everything be going to a single person, or is this a really great opportunity to evaluate those roles and responsibilities we talked about earlier and transition some of the day-to-day tasks that people are doing so that we're more in alignment with where we want our company to go and maybe not where it was 5 years ago? Maybe the company has grown and now you have a CFO or a COO. Some of the tasks you're performing as the CEO are actually more fitted to their roles. This is a great time to identify those things and transition them to new ownership. And then make a plan for how you want to execute your knowledge transfer, especially around the time of transition and succession. There's a lot going on. So having a plan that's written and documented that you can check in on and make sure that you're making the progress that you want to make allows you to be able to have a smoother transition as well. A lot of times it's great to be able to do that as a combination of those three modes that we talked about, so our written, our verbal, and our visual, so that we're really making sure that we're handing down that knowledge. For next gen, what skills and knowledge do I need? Where do I need to improve? Where do I need to grow? Who would be good mentors for me in these areas? These are all really important things to think about and to use as you create kind of your development plan and roadmap, so that you can make continual progress. What resources and training and experience do you need to fill the gaps? So maybe it's taking time to work in different areas of the business, or going back to school, or taking courses at a community college or online. I have a bunch of friends from my affinity group through the Family Business Center that had no background in anything financial. So they went to our Center for Professional Development and they took how to read a financial statement. It was like a one-day course, and they're like, this is amazing. I now know what I'm looking at when I look at these numbers. So there's a lot of resources out there that you can leverage so that you can feel prepared as you go through this transition. which kind of ties into my next point. So it is a really overwhelming process, but there's so many resources that we can leverage to help us through. I've mentioned the Society for Human Resource Management a few times, the Academy to Innovate HR, the small business development centers across the United States have consulting services, workshops, educational opportunities. These are all great places to go and to start looking for the content that you need to really make sure you're ready. Another thing that I cannot encourage enough is affinity or peer groups. Like I mentioned, I'm in a Family Business Center Future Leader Affinity group. Our core group has been together for just over 7 years, and it's been an invaluable resource and confidential space to really work through these processes. There's groups all over the place that are either industry-specific, role-specific, companies like Tech, Entrepreneurs Organization, Masterminds. These are great resources to have that group of people that you can talk to and bounce ideas off of, not only on your transition, but as your business changes and grows. There's a lot of consultants, whether it's business consultants, someone that deals specifically in succession or business continuity, staffing consultants that are all able to help you because they've navigated this before. Like I said earlier, we all think we're really special and our situation is unique, but most of these people have seen it all and know the impacts of different decisions you can make moving forward. So they're great people to have in your tool belt. Don't forget about your key advisors, and I do have a resource page that you'll be able to access at the end with a bunch of resources that I've gathered and combined. And then lastly, review your plan regularly. So I really recommend doing this annually. You want to still make sure it meets your needs and expectations, especially on the emergency planning side. If you wait 2-3 years, your organization could look very different than what your emergency plan had been in 2021. And you're also checking here at this point to make sure you're aligning with your key documents. So our bylaws, operating agreement, partnership agreement, buy-sell, are those all aligned with what we have outlined in our plan? And are we still on the same path? Like we mentioned, technology is changing at an incredible speed. So do we need to make adjustments to where we're going, what our goals are within our company? Are there new key roles and new key people that we need to account for, especially in our emergency plan? And then for our plan transitions, are we still working on the same timeline and assumptions for that transition period? So I have a worksheet here that I don't think we're gonna have time to get to because I wanna leave a couple minutes for questions, but I will have them up here if anyone wants to take it. I also have a PDF on my resources page at the end to kind of just get started on taking a couple minutes to think about those key roles and how you can kickstart the process. So a lot to think about and digest, so what can we take away? So from the practical standpoint of kind of managing that multi-generational workflow, there's 4 areas where we can apply this: are attracting talent, benefits, communication, and training. And then we'll also talk about our next steps in our succession planning journey. So when it comes to attracting talent, we really want to make sure we're eliminating age bias when recruiting. So whether that's blind screening on resumes and applications, or making sure that you're having that unconscious bias training in order to avoid that when you're going through the process, so that's not getting in the way. Also, where and how you are looking for and finding your talent is really important. You're not just looking at college job fairs to fill entry-level positions, but you are looking in places that people that are switching careers or starting a new career path are also able to find you and to join your organization. It's really important to be open to those people as well. So it will build your kind of experience and knowledge base. Being open to people that are not necessarily a 2 or 4 year degree holder, but might have more hands-on experience. I went to a session a couple years ago and they really challenged everyone that after you write every job posting, job description, to look at it and say, is this really required for the role? Many times you have these list of requirements that is just so long, and when you look at it, it's like, okay, no, those are not really required. Like, we need someone that is really good working with people and can learn and be independent and a self-starter. So do they need to have a 4 year degree to do that? Like, that's something that you can sit back and look and think about to really expand your talent pipeline. And then being aware of the language we're using in job interviews and ads. Making sure we're using inclusive language, avoiding terms or phrases that would target people of only a certain generation. I think someone said previously, like digital native is one that you can see in a lot of job postings that is really flagged in HR articles and publications that's targeting that Gen X generation. Same with high energy is one that people use to target that generation. And then on the other end of the spectrum, telling people that they're overqualified when giving interview or applicant feedback is definitely a flag for ageism. So as far as benefits, once you've attracted that talent, you've onboarded them, what do you do from a benefit standpoint to retain that talent across generations? There is a resource from the Society of Human Resource Management on the page at the end that has a benefits resource page that will look at the important things when evaluating benefits from each generation's perspective that I highly recommend if this is something you're interested in or talking about within your company. So it'll help you look at creative ways of offering benefits that are attractive to all your employees. And then a big one is that flexibility in work hours and location. So if you are fortunate enough to be in an industry where this is possible, many employees will expect it to some degree. So for whatever the motivation is behind that it is important to them, it's important to keep that in mind and find ways to remain flexible so that we can help not only retain people that might be at a place where they would otherwise drop out of the workforce, but also it's a way to kind of phase into retirement as people near that retirement age. Communication. It's really important to have multimodal communication so that we are reaching all of our employees in a way that is accessible to them. And making sure that we're not just providing feedback to our employees, but getting feedback from our employees. Don't guess. Let them tell you what they value and what is important to them, especially when it comes to benefits. Making sure you're getting that feedback so you're providing the most value to your employees. As far as training, making sure that we're building those relationships and those mentorship relationships. Not all training has to be something formal. There's a lot of ways to have informal training and knowledge sharing across different roles within your organization that's really important. Megan Gerhardt, who has this Gentelligence framework, who, if you ever have a chance to hear her speak or hear her TEDx, highly recommend it. But she's had a quote that was so simple, it's so impactful. It said, every generation has something they can learn as well as something they can teach those who are older than younger than them. And I think it's a great reminder that we're never too old to keep learning and we're never too young to have something to share with others and value that we can give. And lastly, don't forget the commonalities. Many people want to be engaged in their work, they want to be compensated fairly, and they want to be happy and feel respected in their workplace. So if they're joining your team and they want to work with you, there's obviously already some common value or mission that aligns them. So don't forget that and let our biases creep in and get in our way. Succession planning is for everyone, whether you are a solopreneur, massive corporation. The basic concepts are going to be the same. Our scale and scope are just going to be what changes. And it's really important to put together that right team with the right people and leverage your resources. So next steps. Start your conversations today. If you are interested in either of these topics, I have a page with all of this information. You can sign up for webinars in April. I tried to make them as accessible across as many time zones as I could. And so I would love to see you or anyone from your team there if either of these are topics you wanted to dive into further. Let me grab those. Okay. And please don't forget to rate my session in the Engage to Go app. We love getting your feedback, and I know the Clara staff really appreciates having that feedback as well. And lastly, like I mentioned, I have a resources page, I have my slides, a way to book some time with me on Calendly, connect on LinkedIn. Everything is on this resources page, which is also in my slides in the Engage to Go app as well. And so I would love to connect with you all, chat with you all, and I just thank you for your time and spending your second to last session of Engage with me. Thank you.